And right now, joining us for his monthly visit, we've got a couple left with State Representative Dave Maturen, representative of the 63rd District. And Dave, nice to see you again today.
My pleasure. Nice dry drive over here this morning. So
it is definitely a frosty, crispy morning out there. I saw you get out of your car in the parking lot and all this frost around, and I'm thinking, pretty soon you're going to be done with your term in the legislature and heading down someplace warm, no doubt.
Absolutely. Yeah. Open up the door. There's no frost. So
yes, indeed. So tell us, what is the plan for the legislature there? When do you get back to work, and for how long before? And this is what we call the lame duck session.
Well, we have essentially 12 more days left before the end of this two-year session. It's the last week of November, and the first 3 weeks in December, tentatively, are on the docket. And lots of stuff going on. We've obviously got the two proposals that the legislature picked up, the minimum wage proposal and the sick time proposal. We picked those up not to pass them as they were, but to go ahead and take a look at modifying them. And there's some proposals out there already, some bills in the Senate dealing with that. Taking a look at some other issues that we've got on the docket too. I know the governor's got some things he wants to get done. He wants to get some money for environmental cleanup. Right now, the Clean Michigan Initiative has, 10-20 million left in it, and a couple $100 million we're still paying on the bonds. So I know this governor doesn't want to do that anymore. He wants to find a way we can pay for it on an annual basis. So he's got some things he needs. We'll see what kind of horse trading goes on in the between the governor's office and the legislature.
Well, things are going to change a lot come January, because the governor now will be of a different political party. Governor Whitmer, obviously a Democrat, will still have a majority of Republicans in the state House and state Senate, but the governor could, of course, veto any bill that comes along. So do you think that's going to change the types of things the legislature addresses, or how they go about it?
Well, I think it will. Obviously, when you control all three of the legislative branches, it's certainly a lot easier to get things through. Although Governor Snyder's probably been a little less amenable to some things. He's vetoed not a lot of bills, but a fair amount of bills.
Mm-hmm.
But I think they're going to have to, if they want to get things through Governor Whitmer, they're going to have to be a little bit more maybe conciliatory, a little bit more practical about what they send her. If they keep sending her stuff time after time after time, and it gets vetoed all the time, eventually they're going to figure out, okay, there's got to be some sort of medium ground, medium point, sweet point that we can hit that's going to satisfy the needs of the Republican legislature and the Democratic governor.
Now, let's talk a little bit about the road funding. I don't anticipate a whole lot's going to change right off the bat, but there are people who are elected on, some ideas that, we're going to shift how taxes are spent on that currently. And I wondered if you wanted to weigh in a little bit on some of the ideas that have come up and the pros and cons of those.
Well, there's an idea out there, and it was briefly discussed this session, and basically discounted with taking the 6-cent sales tax on gas and applying that to roads. And that all sounds good and well, but one of the problems is that there's roughly between $750 million and $1 billion, that gets sent to various pools of money, of which the schools is the biggest part. So if you're not going to replace that money, and depending upon the price of gas, of course, the sales tax on a $4 gas is different than $2 gas, but depending upon the number of gallons sold and depending on the price of gas, we're looking at a hit, in my estimation, pulled together some numbers from the House Fiscal Agency and some other places, roughly, at a lower rate for gas, about $315 per pupil, or up to $475 per pupil. So if you don't replace that money to the state school aid fund, then the amounts of money that we've added over the last couple of years, you're either going to wipe out the last 2 years worth of funding increases for public schools, which were $120 and $240, or you're going to wipe out the last 3 years worth of funding increases. So I guess if you don't care about public education, and the only thing you care about is getting your roads fixed with a little bit more money and not having a tax increase, then maybe it's a good thing. But I think, you know, the fact of the matter is that folks have been trying to raise the amount, the basic funding level for public education, and if you don't replace that money, then you're gonna be going backwards, not forward.
Are there places to cut in other areas? That I think it's been proposed by some people that, you know, okay, well, we'll dedicate all that 6 cents sales tax to the roads, and then we'll go find something else to replace the school fund.
Well, you know, it's going to be interesting because the last session, not this session, the last session, we already dedicated $600 million from the general fund to fix roads. So you've already got $600 million from a $10 billion general fund already that you got to put into roads, which you never had to before. And then, you know, this whole fraud, waste, and abuse type of stuff, I think we pretty much eliminated most of that we can't go back to that well time and time again. You've also got a problem because the Constitution says that 100% of the 2 cents of the sales tax and 60% of the 4% of the sales tax goes to the state school aid fund. So you got a constitutional issue here too that you've got to overcome, because right now 73% of that sales tax constitutionally goes to the state school aid fund. So you just can't willy-nilly, the legislature, just grab it and shift it around. So that's another hurdle to overcome. Not saying it's completely impossible, but you got some big hurdles that you've got to overcome to be able to do that.
State Representative Dave Maturen is our guest. 12 days of lame duck session. In other words, the last 12 days for people like yourself or State Senator Mike Knopfs, who will also be departing, and several others. Margaret O'Brien will also be departing the legislature. It's the last chance for lawmakers to get a few things done, but really there's just two big things. You mentioned the governor has a few things he might like to get done, but two big leftovers on the plate from the Michigan ballot proposals that were not on the ballot.
Yeah, the legislature passed the one fair wage proposal and the my time to care proposals, essentially the minimum wage increase and the earned sick leave proposal.
And that kept them off the ballot.
It kept them off the ballot. Legislature has the ability from on our Constitution to pick up citizen initiatives and just simply pass them, which I don't know, some people find kind of strange. You think if the reason they have an initiative is because they're not happy with what the legislature's done, yet they can spend the effort, time, and money gathering signatures, and then the legislature just picks it up. And in this case, they're able to modify it with a majority, whereas once these proposals become law, then it takes a 3/4 majority to pass, to modify those, and that's just not going to happen in the legislature like we have. So the one fair wage essentially is going to raise the minimum wage in Michigan from $9.25 an hour to $12 an hour by 2022 for most workers. And it would eliminate the tipped wage amount that employers pay now. Right now, the employers pay 38% of minimum wage to tip wage employees. So waiters and waitresses, the folks in the restaurant industry, get a base pay of $3.52. It would eliminate that over a period of time, so they would eventually be making straight $12 an hour. But of course, a lot of people would say, well, gee, my hamburger just went up $2.50. You're getting paid $12 an hour. I don't need to tip you. So that's a concern that some of the folks in the restaurant industry have. I shouldn't say some of the folks, a lot of them do. I did have some people in my office the other day that wanted me to essentially leave this alone, that they thought that the initiative was more than what they had to go through, and the legislature shouldn't be able to tinker with it. But obviously, it is a concern for the folks in the restaurant industry. I've been talking to some folks in waiters and waitresses, and for the most part, they're not in favor of this. They make as much, if not more, with the $3.52 plus tips, to make far more than the $12 an hour. Doesn't say it's universal, but there's a lot of people out there are concerned about it.
And what about your colleagues in the legislature and in the Senate? What's their mindset? There must be proposals on the other extreme too to really tweak this thing.
Well, there's a bill in the Senate, Senate Bill 1171 by Senator Hildenbrand, and that keeps that tip wage at 38% of minimum wage. Essentially, that's about all of that bill, that act, that proposal that gets tweaked. So basically, it's a proposal that the restaurant owners and a lot of the restaurant workers are in favor of.
So that's the only issue. It is going to go up to $12 plus per hour in 2 years.
Unless somebody else, unless when we come back next Tuesday, that somebody else has got another bill to modify it. So that right. These probably are not. And there's another one dealing with the sick leave, but they're probably not the last thing we're going to see on these. But at least that takes that issue off the table. You know, if you look at you go to McDonald's, you see signs out there, help wanted, starting wage $12 an hour. So I think eventually with the economy and everything else, that minimum wage is going to get up to that level at some point in time anyway. The big issue is this particular section of the workforce and how they're paid and how they're traditionally paid and how they look at it. So there may be other things, but this is the one that's been proffered out there by Senator Hildenbrand. We got the Earned Sick Time initiative called My Time to Care. Essentially, it mandates that a worker, for every 30 hours of work, they earn $1 1 hour of paid sick time. If you're less than nine employees or less, you're considered a small business. They limit that to 40 hours of paid sick leave, but you also have the ability to take additional 32 hours not paid sick leave off, so that makes it 72. And if you're a bigger business, 10 employees or more, then it's mandated that you pay them for 72 hours of paid sick leave. This is for many people a lot bigger issue than the minimum wage issue. I know a lot of folks in the manufacturing industry are concerned about it. Employees, plus they get to roll this over, so the sick leave is carried forward from year to year. And the ability to use it for mental or physical issues by an individual or a family member or a domestic partner and all of their relatives, it's pretty broad spread as to what you can use this for. But I know there's been some concerns with folks who have businesses in other states where they have this in effect. It's hard sometimes to pull a workforce together. All of a sudden, just before the shift starts, somebody's second cousin's child gets ill and they've got to attend them because they're a family member, on and on you go. So I think it's difficult for employers. Senator Shirkey has introduced Senate Bill 1175. It modifies some of the aspects of this. It shortens the time for employers to retain records from 3 years to 6 months, and it does away with some of the rebuttable presumptions about if an employer takes an action against somebody, was it attributable to their using the sick leave or not. I would anticipate probably seeing some more modifications to this. So it's gets pretty much fast and furious. You're going to see things introduced in committee, out of committee, on the floor of the House or the Senate that same day, and pushed through, and the other chamber then gets it and has to deal with it. So,
and not a lot of time to do it. And
no.
If they do, regardless of what they end up with, then there's a chance that if somebody doesn't like it, there'll be a court challenge.
Could very well be. We'll see. If a judge says, gee, there's a petition initiative, they got a couple 100,000 signatures, you picked it up, you passed it, and you modified it so much that you've effectively gutted this thing. Can you do that? So I think there's probably a line that, if it gets crossed, is going to leave that opening for the court to say, hey, just a minute now, the spirit of this has been gutted. So.
Well, when you come here again next month for your final visit, we'll know which way it went and what the final tally was, and we'll talk about that and any other action that maybe the legislature took up, and we'll also look at we'll look back on your years in the state legislature. I think 4 of them total, right?
Yep, 4 years. Yep,
4 of them total, and many years of public service at all levels of government. Dave Maturen, thanks. Nice to see you. We'll talk to you then.
My pleasure. See you then.